As you can see, everybody, Paul Ducklin from Sophos Naked Security, back for our weekly Friday evening Facebook Live, or evening in the UK, maybe afternoon or late morning in the United States. As you can see, today's topic is all about staying on top of phishing scams. So going to give you some advice. I know we've been through phishing scams before, but we've just published a research article on nakedsecurity.sophos.com about a particular type of phishing scam. It's almost indistinguishable from ones you will have seen before, but just want to go into why this one's a little bit different and give you some extra tips on the way that the crooks have 12 different ways of doing things. Stuart Hamilton's watching. Hi Stuart, can you hear? That is the burning question. I'm presuming if you couldn't, you would have said, hey, I can't hear. I have had some problems with the sound before, mainly me forgetting to turn it on, so I just want to make sure that that's all working. So before we start, however, let me say that there's an alternative theme for today's video, which is something you may have seen us talking about yesterday, which was the 1st of October 2020 on Naked Security, and that is be cyber smart. Do your part, be cyber smart. There it is. Do your part, be cyber smart. That's the motto for this year's Cybersecurity Awareness Month. Now, it's National Cybersecurity Awareness Month in the US, NCSAM. There's European Cybersecurity Awareness Months. Many other countries openly support this, and we urge you to do so too, because our theme is friends don't let friends get scammed. So I know that a lot of what you hear in Cybersecurity Awareness Month, it's the 17th year it's happened. It started in 2004. So a lot of people are quite cynical about it by now. They go, oh, it's just people who haven't got anything better to say. They just want to jump on a bandwagon and they want this way to give old advice and make it seem new. The issue is there is still some basic advice, even advice we were giving back in 2004 that is still valuable today, and there's a significant minority, not that many people, but enough to be problematic, people who aren't doing it because they're ignorant or foolish or gullible or they don't care, just that they don't yet know. Maybe they're new to the internet or they just haven't got their heads around cybersecurity yet. There are still people who are just waiting, unfortunately, to be found by the crooks and victimized by them. And it's our collective duty to make sure that, as well as making ourselves secure, we help to bring the other guys along as well. Because remember, when it comes to cybersecurity, an injury to one is an injury to all. If someone hacks your friend's computer and gets all the contacts off there, guess who's going to be in that list? You. So in other words, if you help your buddies, you actually help yourself by doing that at the same time. Teresa and Jim Patience are watching. Robert Peters is watching. Hi everybody. Quite a lot of people watching. I assume that means you can all hear. Oh, and by the way, you'll see I've got I haven't got a slogan on my shirt. And Karen from Arizona, when she joined, she was, oh, what's on the back of the shirt? So I'm not going to turn around today, but it doesn't have a slogan on the back. On the back it just says evolve, which is kind of a theory that Sophos has about what you have to do with cybersecurity. It's not enough to say set and forget or wow, I've got this fantastic new technology, it'll last for 10 years. We need to adapt our products and our services, and of course we need to adapt our thinking, and we also need to adapt the way that we, as I said before, bring other people along with us, our friends and our families, or maybe our at-risk relatives, people who might otherwise be targets of crooks. We can help them, and by doing so we help themselves. So let's go on to the phishing scam. The article was published today on nakedsecurity.sophos.com. It's one of our serious security series, so it's techie enough for techies, but it's not so techie that if you're not technically inclined, you won't understand it. So do have a look whether you're technical or not. It's a great way. What we did is we took two scams. One came directly to us. It was a phishing email. Another one was kindly reported by a thoughtful user of ours who's regularly reports scams that they experience in case they could be helpful to teach other people. Both of these scams, they came from completely different cyber gangs as far as we can tell, completely independently done, but they're using the same technique. It's not a brand new technique, but we seem to be seeing a little bit more of it now. And I'll show you what the email looks like and you'll see what the difference is. So you think about how phishing normally works. typical phish that's based on email and some website where you put in a fake password. That's what these scams are about. But they're a little bit different because normally, if you think about it, you get an email, there's some big story in the email about how you have to do this, how you can win a phone, how your bank account's in danger, how your electricity bill's overdue, how you missed a courier delivery, all of those things, just enough to get you think, well, maybe I should take a look. And then typically there's a web link that if you don't check it carefully when you click it, you land on a site that looks like the real login page but isn't, and when you put in your password, whoop, off it goes to the crooks, not to the real site, and now the crooks in theory can log in as you. So this one is a little bit different. And I hope you can see why. I'll try and get that as close as I can. You'll see there, it's the normal stuff that you might regularly expect. It just says, in this case, it's a pro forma invoice, I think, and somebody's just sent it to you. Oh, this is something that we want you to pay. If you're working from home, which you probably are, if you're self-employed, you probably get this kind of thing all the time. And normally in a phish, you think, hey, there's a link. You need to be careful of links, but here there isn't. There's just an attachment called proformainvoice.html, and you can imagine it's very tempting to click it because there isn't a link that says, oh look, it's supposed to be a Microsoft login, but the domain is some, Gondwanalang in hacker.example.com/dodgy.php, which doesn't look like a Microsoft login. So those links, we always tell you, watch the link before you click it, because if there's any hint that it's fake, just don't go there. The problem here is that the web page, if you like, the fake web page that we're going to see in a moment that has the bogus login form on it, the phishers have brought it with them. So now they don't need a link in the email. There's no URL, there's no anchor tag, there's no hyperlink that you can hover over and see that. There's just an attachment. But instead of being a doc or a text or a PDF, like you're used to, like you probably get from a lot of popular accounting software packages that maybe people who are suppliers or contractors of yours use that generate PDFs, it's just an HTML file. Now the problem is, what that means is when you click it, whoops, I clicked the wrong thing. When you click it, of course, you're effectively visiting a website, but the page came along in the email. So what happens is you haven't got a link to check, but instead of opening a document, you actually jump into your web browser. So it looks like a doc there. You see they got some blurred stuff in the background. That's a common trick the crooks use to avoid having to have real content. And they're saying, oh, you have to log in first, and presumably that's a security thing that will make the stuff in the background visible. So there's a login page, and you think, well, I'm not really on a website, although you're in your browser. And have a look at the top. I'll zoom in on that URL in a minute. Basically, what you've done, you are on a web page, but the web page is locally stored in a temporary folder on your own computer. And you put in the username, you put in the password, you click that View Password button, and the View Password button does exactly what it would if you were on a rogue website out there on the big bad internet. Even though there isn't a web server here. It's just a file that your email client, which wouldn't allow certain things to run in HTML, wouldn't allow JavaScript, for example. You're now in your browser, in the HTML file, but the giveaways you might usually rely upon, like, did the link look bad? Oh, there's a web certificate. You go and look at the web certificate that does the encryption for the site, and instead of being something that's, attested by Microsoft, it's maybe a Let's Encrypt temporary certificate, or it's a certificate that comes for free with a trial version of some web hosting platform. Because the crooks aren't averse to using free trials of web hosting platforms, or they just pay a modest amount to get 1 month of service. They know by the end of the month they're going to be cut off by the service provider for doing dodgy stuff, but by then they've cut and run. And those are great hints if you know what to look for. The link doesn't look right, that's not a Microsoft domain. The web certificate, really? Microsoft using a Let's Encrypt certificate? Not very likely. So those are great giveaways, except they don't happen here. You're on a web page, you're filling in a form. When you click the button, what you've entered in the form will go to an outside website. But the URL, I'll zoom in. This is the one when I made the images for the article on naked security. I was using Firefox on Linux, so I get it's just a file : / URL instead of HTTP or HTTPS, and you see it's in /temp, which is the standard Unix or Linux temporary directory. So it's just a temporary file. It looks like what you get for any temporary file that might happen at any time. If you're on Windows, very, very similar, except that, of course, you've got the C:/users duck app data local temp, etc., etc. So it looks completely innocent, and it doesn't look as though it's on a rogue website, because it isn't on a rogue website. It was rogue content in the email, but it came in as an attachment. It doesn't have any links, clickable links in it. The problem is that with a phish of this type, why the crooks do this is, let's go, I've gone back. There's the page where you would type in your username and your password and you click that button. Wouldn't you think in today's browsers that in the same way that when you hover over a link, it shows you what URL you're going to go to. Now, JavaScript, Google does this, for example, lots of sites do it. The JavaScript can make the link you see when you hover over something not look correct, although generally in an email it will look correct. But at least the browser tries. You hover over a link, up pops where you're going next. Wouldn't you think that when you hovered over the button, that when you click it, will upload your data to some other site, that it would show you where that link went? Well, technically, it's not a link. It's not called an href in HTML terms, or a hypertext reference. In web forms, it's just called action. It is a URL, it is where your data's going, and you can't get browsers easily to show you what it is, which is a bit of a problem, and that's why the crooks do this. They know that by the time you get to this page, which isn't on an external URL, there's no easy way for you to see when you click the button, where will my password go? Oh, good gracious, it's asking me to log into a Microsoft service, but that URL has nothing to do with Microsoft. What am I doing sending my password there? So it's hard to double check. What do you do about it? Well, there's no easy way, I'm afraid. There are probably some plugins for the various browsers that you can use. But if you go to the Naked Security article, and you don't need to be too technical to do this, it is slightly technical in the way it works, but all modern browsers have a thing called developer tools. It's F12 on Edge, it's Control-Shift-I on Firefox, it's Option-Command-I on Safari. So you have to learn your way around it. But that lets you dig into the website and you can search for, we show you how to do this in the article, you can search for the actual form, the actual HTML for this form, and that form has to tell your browser where your data will go. So we actually show you how, if you really want to, you can actually dig into the HTML on a web page and make sure where the data that you're about to submit in that form is going. By the way, the developer tools in modern browsers, this is a sort of aside, they are a fantastic way of getting into cybersecurity. People often say to us, oh, like, what programming language should I learn? I want to learn JavaScript. How do I learn about proxies and web servers and Wireshark and network sniffing tools and all of that stuff? You'll probably want to learn that, but a fantastic way to start learning about web security is simply the developer tools stuff built into every browser. Because for any web page you visit, you can dive in and look, how did they make it? How did it work? What scripts were loaded? Which network traffic happened? What redirects happened? You can even go in afterwards and change items in the web page to see what happens. Well, if I change that form, or that form's going to a dodgy place, let me blank out the URL but still see what happens so I can go ahead and see how the web page behaves next. So those developer tools, they're great for starting to get into web security, but they're also fantastic for taking account of what's happening in a website when the browser itself won't show you, and the crooks are determined to use that in order, that fact that the browser won't show you, to try and trick you. So you don't have to go into the developer tools if you don't want to, but we show you how to do it for all the popular browsers, and it's a great way of learning and double checking. And you can even do it on genuine websites, right? Say you're logging in with your bank or a rental car company or something like that. You think, well, I wonder where the credit card number goes. I wonder where I'm putting in my address and my driving license number. Where does that go? You can have a look and see what they're doing. So if you like, it's sort of like keeping them honest. And if you do see a problem, then you can let them know, and cybersecurity gets better when everyone has that little bit of vigilance, because you get into that idea of if you see something, you can say something. So this is phishing, old school phishing, email, dodgy web form that looks like the real deal because it's been pirated, but it isn't on the real site. your username and password go to a fake page. But the bit in the middle, the second stage, the thing isn't a link in the email. So this is a slightly different type of phishing, and it's a fantastic reminder that there are 2, 3, 5, 12 ways to skin the insecurity cat as far as the crooks are concerned, and learning out all the different tricks they use. It's great for you because you can protect yourself, and it's great for your friends and family because it means you can give them that little bit more advice. The good news is this is similar enough to regular phishing that you don't have to learn a whole new load of tricks and techniques to be able to keep yourself safe. I mentioned the developer tools. That's just if you want to do it. As I said, we've explained how you can use browser developer tools to improve your security, but you don't need to go that deep. I'll just take you very quickly through my tips. So the first one is avoid, and I'm just saying this as a general rule. You may not have thought of this so far. My recommendation is simply avoid HTML or HTM, as they're sometimes abbreviated. Avoid attachments that are HTML files. Unless it comes from someone you know and they regularly need to send you actual HTML files. You might be a web developer, in which case a different story. And the reason I say that as a very simple rule is that I receive, of all the HTML web attachments, email attachments I've received in the last, let's say, 2 or 3 years, and I've had plenty, I can't remember one where it wasn't somebody trying to scam or trick me. In other words, they were sending me the HTML file knowing that it's a way to get me to leap out of the comparative safety of my email client into my browser. So it's a bit of a drastic step, but I don't think you will actually miss any attachments you were meant to see if you simply go, you know what, HTML attachment, it's probably a crook, they've probably got my worst interests at heart, no thanks. The second tip, and this is, we've mentioned this many times before, don't log in on web forms that you reach by virtue of an email. Now, in the past, when we've mentioned this, we've said when you've in an email and you've clicked a link and you've gone somewhere else and suddenly a web form appears, ignore it, because if it's a service you use regularly, you should know how to get to that login page by yourself without relying on anything in the email. So you need to think it's not just clicking links. Opening attachments is another way of getting HTML into your browser where the crooks control what you see, and more importantly, they control where your passwords go next. So if you've got an email that as a result of something in the email suddenly lands you on a login page, as the US National Cybersecurity Awareness guys love to say, and I'm a real fan of this saying, stop, think, connect. It might be legitimate, although increasingly legitimate companies are avoiding sending you links that go to login pages. They're just saying you need to log in, you should know how to do that. Certainly my bank does that. So make sure you know how to get to the pages where there are login forms that you expect, so you can always go there by yourself. After all, if the original email that said, hey, there's something on this service, there's something in your electricity account, there's something with your banking stuff, there's an invoice online, there's a thing in your contact management system that you need to see, then when you log yourself in with your own bookmark in your own way to that site, and you put in the password on the legitimate site, you'll find out whether the email was legitimate or not. Either there will be a message waiting for you, in which case, well, the email was legitimate, so it was just a nice warning to remind you to log in, or there won't be, in which case you know I'd just beat a scammer. The third thing, we've said this before, I'll mention it because I have to, and that is, for any service that supports two-factor authentication, consider turning it on. Remember that the phishing campaign that I just showed you, it's all about getting your username and your password. Now, if you don't have two-factor authentication on many accounts, that's kind of enough for the crooks to get in as you. And once they've got your username and password, it works over and over again. Of course, with two-factor authentication, you don't want them to get your password, ideally. So you still want to choose a strong password and keep it secret, keep it to yourself, keep it unique. But even if the crooks get that, they're still not home and dry. So the two-factor authentication is giving them one more hurdle to jump, and it's quite a difficult one. So you might as well do it because the inconvenience to you is tiny compared to the extra barrier it puts in the way of the crooks. The fourth thing is, if you do realize, oh no, I fell for a phish, I put my credit card number in the wrong, I put a password in the wrong site, act quickly. Because remember, once the crooks have got that data, either they will use it themselves or they will flog it to the next guy. And if a crook gets your password, he's not only going to try that password on one account, he's going to try on all of your accounts. Of course, you don't use the same password on more than one account. But the point is, the quicker you act and get in and change your password, then the less likely it is that the crooks will beat you to it. So remember, there used to be a rule in the old days, oh, every month you should change, or 3 months or whatever it was, you should change your password. That's considered old hat now, because all you do is you routinely change your password and you think that's all you need to know, all you need to do. The problem with doing it is just a kind of habit that you get into, and there's no point in changing your password if it hasn't been compromised. What's much more important is if you think that your password is at risk, then you don't wait till the end of the next quarter when you would have changed your password anyway. Go and do it now. The same if you put your credit card number, payment card details into a fake site, get your card out, turn it over, there's a phone number on there, call it up, tell the bank. They can act quickly, and they will. The sooner you act, the less time there is for the crooks to get ahead. And lastly, I'm not saying this because Sophos sells a product that does exactly this. In fact, I'm not even saying it because we give away for free use at home a product that does exactly this. But consider using a web filter. You're probably used to an antivirus that's all about waiting for when bad stuff arrives, however it gets in, it goes, no, you can't keep the bad stuff out. But as you know, with phishing, the problem is there isn't any malware involved. What the crooks are trying to do is they're trying to sucker you, they're trying to seduce you, to trick you into sending the good stuff, i.e. your password, out. And a web filter can stop you going to the bad sites in the first place. So in this phishing scam, the scams that I just showed you, where there's an email that contains a web page, and so that there's no web traffic for a web filter to block, the crooks still need to have a web connection because they still need to exfiltrate to steal the password at the end. So they still need to make a connection to a site. They're just making it harder for you to find out where that would be, because you can't hover over the link and see. So what a web filter can do is it can jump in and say, whoa, you're about to connect to a site that has a low reputation, that is not trustworthy, or was absolutely known to belong to crooks. We're not even going to let that happen. So even if you put your password in the form, even if you click the button, the data won't get out. So you're not just keeping the bad stuff out, you're keeping the good stuff in. So to whiz through those very quickly, firstly, I recommend avoid HTML or HTM, that's shorthand for HTML. Avoid attachments of that sort, because in my experience, although there's no reason why someone shouldn't send you an HTML file, every time it's happened to me, and remember, I am involved in web publishing and web development, and I work for a security company, even in my position, I can't remember receiving an HTML file as an email attachment that was not a crook trying to get one over me. So if you just avoid them, basically, if the person really wanted you to see it and they really did know you, they'll probably find another way of letting you know. The second thing is, don't log in when you suddenly hit a password form that you reached on the basis of an email that came from somebody you didn't know. Because if it's an account where you expect to have to log in, you should know how to get to that page yourself. And if you never click links, or you never rely on attachments that arrived in email to tell you where to go next, if you always go there yourself, you kind of immunize yourself from a whole swathe of phishing attacks, because the crooks simply can't convince you if you never do it. I've said turn on two-factor authentication if you can. We say this all the time because it just adds one more step. It means if the crooks do scam your password, it's still not enough. It's still only a part of their work done, rather than actually being the keys to the castle that lets them in. Remember that password changing, you don't necessarily need to have a routine where you do it every 3 months. There's no point in changing your password if it hasn't been hacked. What you need to do is, if you think you have made a mistake, go in and fix it quickly. So don't delay, do it today. And lastly, use a web filter. So if you're getting an antivirus like Sophos Home for Mac and Windows, as I mentioned, that's free. That has this. It doesn't just scan for malware in and out. It also scans for, should you even be going to that website in the first place, because it could put you in harm's way. The crooks might not have the malware on or the dangerous stuff on there yet, but why even go there if your security product can tell you that that thing is already sort of condemned by virtue of being associated with badness. So thanks for listening, everybody. Watch out for phishing attacks. When it comes to Cybersecurity Awareness Month, remember, it's not really about us trying to get if you're minded enough to watch this video, then you're probably not one of the people who needs to go, oh, I must go and read all the Cybersecurity Awareness Month stuff. Basically, what we're saying is, friends don't let friends get scammed. So look out for your friends, look out for your family, look out for your colleagues. It makes a difference. If we all fight back just a little bit against the crooks, that hurts them the most. So thanks for watching, everybody, and until next week, stay secure.